Welcome back, guys, to the Enablers podcast.
Welcome back, guys.
Hey guys, how you guys doing?
Today, we are going to be talking about an interesting topic, I think, which is specifically focusing on PhDs. Why do we do a PhD, or why do certain people decide to pursue that, right? And to develop the topic further, we invited a special guest on this podcast episode, Dr. Azalia Zaharuddin. Azalia was recently awarded a PhD from the Graduate School of International Studies, Utsunomiya University in Japan, focusing on Japanese language learning. She is also the editor of the Tudong Anthology. It's a book basically published in 2017 looking at the many different perspectives on putting on the hijab across Malaysian women. She also has a YouTube channel called Academically Speaking, speaking about her experiences and tips for those out there who are interested in knowing more about a PhD and what life is basically about doing it. And on a personal level, I've known Azalia since we were in primary school. I think we were friends at the age of 10, or was it 9? I can't quite remember. But we were actually childhood rivals in a lot of storytelling competitions. And then down the line, when we went to boarding school, I saw her again in debating competition. And in fact, we had to fight each other. I remember at one of the semifinals. And yeah, so we go way back. And thank you so much for agreeing to collaborate with us, Azalia.
Thank you so much for having me.
I need to ask though, so Megat says that you guys were childhood rivals. Was this mutual, Azalia, or was this just one-sided by Megat?
No, it was a rivalry.
Okay.
It was a rivalry since I think
Standard 4.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. Standard 4, 5, 6 was when it got intense. But I got the last word in standard 6 because I got first.
Oh my god, I can't believe you remember this.
I remember.
I know this is off tangent, but Azalia started storytelling since standard 1 or standard 2, and she couldn't shut up about it, basically, right? In the school. And then I decided maybe I have the ability to speak on stage. Then I started standard 4, but I was miserable. But I beat standard 5 lah. That's all I'm gonna say. And I was happy with that.
Well done.
I'll take that. But yeah, we were child rivals, but now we're civil.
Civil.
But focusing on to more serious topic though for this podcast, I think in London, right, with Kyrene, we have a few group of friends as well who are in the process of finishing their PhDs, and within that, we kind of like understand a little bit about what they do, and half the time they talk about how stressful it is and how you'd never understand their pain. But we kind of like brush it off and, take it quite lightly because, it's a world that is completely separate from what I personally know because I decided to start working, for example, right after my undergraduate studies, right? But I think it would be useful to kind of hone into a little bit more on that discussion because I think it will be helpful for those who might want to consider doing a PhD down the line, either directly after they've graduated or maybe after taking a break from their work to focus on a specific topic that might be interesting to them, right? And it also kind of develops the previous episode on decision making, which I think is kind of relevant to the whole theme of the podcast. So we've kind of developed a few themes and questions that we want to go over in this podcast. So maybe Azalia and Kyrene, feel free to chime in as well. If you could kind of elaborate a little bit about the decision process when deciding to pursue the PhD, because I don't think it was something that was like an overnight decision, right? Or was it, basically?
No. Azalia, you can go first.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would say it was an overnight decision, but it was a decision that was in a way kind of dropped in my lap. Long story short, after my degree, I knew I wanted to do my master's. I just knew I wanted to do master's. I loved research. While doing my undergrad thesis, I loved research and I just wanted to continue doing it. So I wanted to do a master's. But the thing was, I applied for a scholarship, which is this one, the Membuka Kakusho Scholarship, the MAC Scholarship. And it was for a master's degree. So I was in KL waiting for the results. But the downside was waiting for the results took a year. For the scholarship, it was taking too long.
Oh, really?
Yeah, especially the selection process. So my parents thought that you shouldn't be just waiting on this scholarship result. So it was either for me to work or just find another university in Malaysia to go to. And so I kind of did both. I interned for a month, and then I found out I got into a MA program at USM. So at that time, I thought, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go for this MA program because I don't know if I'm going to get the scholarship or not. So just do the MA. So halfway through my MA, the results came out, and I was shortlisted for the scholarship. So I was ready to let it go, to be honest. I was ready to let it go because I'm already doing the MA.
Yeah.
I didn't go to Japan to do it again. But then my parents talked to me and kind of asked me, like, can you ask if you can change it to a PhD? Like, don't you want that? And I was like, well, I do want that, because the MA that I was doing was a coursework program, not exactly the research I wanted to do. So we talked it out with the embassy, and they say, yeah, sure, you can still change it to a PhD program. So in a nutshell, that's how the PhD way kind of paved its way for me and how I got here. But thinking about the decision of how I did it, I mean, it was really scary at first, thinking that, oh my God, right after I finish this, then I'm just, going into the PhD. And I had no other experience and outside, so it was a bit scary. But I knew at that time that I love doing research. Like, it was something I liked.
So the research that you discovered during your degree years, was it also something that you knew, as in, I mean, there's a lot of things you can research about, right? And I know you're doing Japanese language education. Was that something that you did in your degree as well, and then paved you towards, like, yes, this is something I wanted to pursue as a subject domain as well? Or was it just more of, I love research, I want to get into a researcher role, and hence I want to do PhD?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. I don't want this to be too lengthy, so you guys can cut it off if it's unrelevant. But either way, if you can ask Magat here, my friend from childhood and somewhere through high school, I was a debater, I was a storyteller, I love to talk, and so that way was kind of like paid for me, especially when you go to boarding school. Debater, so they're like, okay, you're gonna go to law school, you're gonna join a debate team, so that way was like paid for me in that sense, right? And I was like, okay, I was ready. I got an offer at UIA actually.
Oh.
And yeah. Okay. So, but then the scholarship again, the Japanese scholarship came, and I was like, and this whole part of my life, my love for English, the debates, expressing myself just got yanked away. But then when I realized it on another level was doing my degree, and my final year thesis was when I did research. It was kind of like debating in a way, but on paper. You have a hypothesis, right. You have an argument that you want to support. You find all the evidence that you need. You do the research. So on a deeper level, it is kind of similar. So, and that's why I really enjoyed it, and I really loved it so much that my thesis was developed for them, and how my love for research came to be.
And just to chime in on a personal level as well, I know as much as you couldn't stop talking as a child, you also couldn't stop writing as well. I remember till this date, you, at the age of 10 in standard 4, you wrote a book. And I always time to time remind Azalia about this book that she wrote. It's called Wormasapa. Basically, I don't know, I can't remember, but it's giant worms kind of like ravaging the city and eating everyone and eating anything. I don't know what, but for a 10-year-old to be able to write a book that is more than 10 pages, I think is outstanding. So your writing skill, or in general, your language ability was very refined even at a young age. So I think it must have propelled you into either both speech and writing and research, right?
Yeah, I think so. The whole Japanese part of it really shifted my view and gave me a new point of view in my opinion of that. So, yep.
Yeah, no, because I think I got to know Azalia a bit later on once you actually went to boarding school. And for some reason, I got to know you via Magan and Eddie, another friend of ours. But it never struck me that you had any kind of string attached to Japan in any way. But so I was really surprised when I found out that you actually came to Japan. But that's quite a big leap. I mean, compared to myself, I always knew, and everyone who knew me back in school knew that I wanted to go to Japan. Hence, it wasn't such a surprise for a lot of people that, oh, I ended up going to pursue a degree in Japan. But for yourself, that must have been quite a big leap because it's a huge change in culture, mindset, language, especially. And if expression is something that you, evidently expression is something that you love, having to learn another language and express yourself in a different language, that's a huge part of, that's a huge challenge, I feel. But how do you come about having the courage to say, you know what, I'll do this?
To be honest, I think coming back to the PhD decision-making process, if you'd say, I wasn't confident in my Japanese language skills. Honestly speaking, in preparatory, I once got 0 on a listening test, and my senseis had really low hopes for me in making it because I was really not that well suited. But I think that kind of grit of making through it is actually what devoted me into doing the research of like, why did I not learn Japanese as easily as everyone else? Like, was it only me, or did anyone else had this problem? And asking those questions is what made me really want to do research and really want to find out why. And I think that's what at the end of the day how I kind of got here, because of wanting to find the answer to that and wanting to let at least other people know that when it comes to languages, it's not really about proficiency 100%, because people always think that, oh, you have to be at the native level to be accepted, but it doesn't have to be. You can speak the most rojak Japanese and whatever, and you're still a language speaker.
Fun fact, so Magat and I just learned about this recently, is that for people who want to learn Japanese, they learn it straight from the get-go with the Japanese language without introductory with your own language. So that made it doubly hard for Azalia and even Ruiz to learn Japanese.
Yeah, that was the direct method. Actually, yeah, we call it the direct method. So, but not all places practice it. But I guess for the preparatory places, they do use it.
So, just for our listeners, just to explain a bit more what the direct method is. So, correct me if I'm wrong, and if you experience differently, Azalia. But when I first started learning Japanese in Malaysia's college, the first teacher that came in was a Malaysian teacher, Malay lady, Muslim lady. You wouldn't expect her to speak Japanese from just her looks. She came in the classroom, and we had like 12 people in the classroom. She started speaking in Japanese fully. No one word of English nor Malay. We were like, what? We were basically just trying to make words, trying to make sense of what words is coming out of her mouth, literally. Because we were like, what are you telling us? What are you teaching us? But it all started off by the context, right? Her showing the book or her showing the blackboard, saying the words. And I guess that's what you call the direct method. But yeah.
I would say I tried to learn French at the age of 23 or something, not via the direct method, by having the French word and then the translations. Let's just say I have like 0 French retention at the moment. So perhaps it would have been more effective had it been more direct. But then again, French is really hard to understand. Completely off tangent.
I think I just remembered when I was learning Arabic. So I took an Arabic language for my PMR examination. And I'm pretty sure my Ustaza taught us in a mixed dialect method. She would speak in Arabic language, but then for certain words, she would say, okay, this is the meaning, this is the meaning. But she would just continue asking us in Arabic. And then we're just trying to figure out, okay, is she asking a question or is she stating a statement? So, it's kind of very interesting, actually, now that you mentioned it. I think it's like kind of a good thing. You kind of retain a little bit in that sense. That's a very interesting decision process making that you went through, Azalia. I think I want to say somewhat similar, but also different, because I basically did science since my degree. And during my undergrad in America, I did 2 independent research with 2 different professors. And I generally enjoy the whole doing research and reading articles. And that was my first exposure on reading journal articles. It was hard at first, but then because of the challenge, I wanted it. I get through it, and towards the end of the project, we came up with a conclusion, and that was very satisfactory. Like, I was very satisfied with what I did, and I wanted to do more of that. So at that point, I already knew I wanted to do a PhD, but it's just a matter of, okay, will I want to stick with immunology? This is what I'm doing now, or would I want to try something else? So that took a while for me to maneuver myself and find experience and so forth. Because after my degree, I actually got an offer to do a PhD straight away. But then I wasn't sure if I would commit for 3 to 4 years full of something that I'm not really sure if I wanted it. So then I thought, okay, maybe I'll do a master's first and see, actually, is this what I wanted? I get more lab experience and talk to more people. So the decision of wanting to do a PhD was there, but it's just a matter of what PhD. But yeah.
I've always had this question because I've never been able to ask, especially for science majors, right? Like, you join a lab, right, in order to conduct your experiments. Do you come up from scratch what the research is about, or do you follow what the lab is doing or what your supervisor is asking you to do, or is it your own idea?
I think that differs from people and grant and their lab itself. So for mine, my supervisor and I came up with the idea and we applied for a grant. But I know certain people who was given the topic from the get-go and getting sponsored for that. But again, in science, your initial topic might not lead to the end topic. So your question in the beginning will change over time. But the trajectory is pretty much similar. Like, okay, you need to do something with autoimmune diseases with T cells or B cells. So your main idea is there, but it's just the question will differ. But yeah, that depends.
We have spoken a little bit about the decision process, but I think I'm keen to understand what the journey is like. I've so far seen the journey really from the outside view, looking at Kyrene and a few other friends in London who were going through the PhD around the same time when I started work, and kind of understand, the stresses, the amount of sacrifice personally on the mental health and all that takes on you. But I think I just wanted to hone in a little bit more from the both of you, kind of what was it like really doing it, and what were some of the best and the worst parts of a PhD that you kind of never want to have to ever have to deal with ever again, kind of thing.
Irene can go first.
I mean, as you all know, my journey still has an end.
Oh yeah,
it's still
true.
ongoing. But I think in the beginning, it's very exciting. I was very excited. I was ready to put all in. And ideas are churning. You talk to people, you read articles, and you're like, okay, this is my plan. This is my experiments that I need to do. This is how many samples that I need to get from patients. So, as plan goes, it never really goes accordingly. And so that's when pretty much everything went haywire. And I remember I remember, I think towards my second year, I started to freak out because I didn't know if I could finish this on time. Is my thesis going to be very, fulfilling? Like this is looking like all failure of experiments. Like, what am I doing? So, a PhD is your own project. You have your supervisor to guide you, but it's up to you to make your own decision, to answer your questions. So that was it's a big responsibility. And I think that learning curve for me was very steep, because before this, I've always had postdoc to talk to, and then we came to a decision collectively. But this is all on me. If I make the wrong decision, I have to live with it. And then, it'll impact my thesis, and will I be able to graduate? So the challenges is more than the PhD itself. The challenges is for you to know how to make a decision based on what you know and what you have to know. I think that is the bit where I struggled the most from the beginning. I think also it's a lot of misconception in people thinking that PhD is 3 years and you have to be done in 3 years. So whatever you have is whatever you have. But that doesn't really apply to a lot of PhD in different countries, because I knew that in America, you need to publish a certain amount of papers. So even if your PhD takes 10 years, you have to find money, but you make sure that you publish a certain amount of papers. Whereas UK is probably a bit more lenient, but it also depends on university to university. So misconception for a PhD being hard differs from country to country and lab to lab, or your course itself. What have you been through your PhD journey, Azalia?
I can definitely relate to everything. Like exactly the same. The beginning is exciting. It's like, because in Japan, you spend some amount of time as a research student before you get into your program. So that time as a research student is for you to tune out your proposal, what you're going to do. And so you spend roughly 6 months to a year, or when you feel like you're ready to get into the program, you take the entrance exam, because we have entrance exams in Japan, and then you enter the program. So I was so ready to start my research. I was a very impatient research student, and I learned it the hard way. As you said, in the second year, I panicked because I realized that my experiment, because I also had my own experiments with students, and there was some issues with validity. Something's wrong with my test. Statistics didn't add up, and I was like, okay, I can't do the experiment over because the kids are gone.
Yeah. Gosh.
And, then you're like, oh no, and that's the other thing, is that different from humanities in the sense that you are really alone in that sense, because you don't have a lab, or you don't have someone who's doing anything with you. It's like the idea is your own. So you carry, your supervisor is there, like you said. They guide you in a sense, but they're like, for my experience, not straightforward. Very, okay, you do what you think is right. Kind of. So that part was a loneliness that I express to anyone, not even my husband. Like, he can't understand how trapped you feel. And I didn't have any seniors or anyone who's doing something similar to me. So the second year was like that.
Was that why you kind of started creating the YouTube channel with your PhD kind of like vlog to kind of verbalize what you were feeling?
I think so. I think I really wanted to document the journey, because I funny enough, I was already writing it down, but I also wanted something that I could see for myself. And now that I am at the finish line, I look back at it and I do feel a sense of relief, of everything that I've gone through. So the second year panic, and of course the same thing. Can I write a 300-page thesis? Is it even feasible? and then panicking, and then so that part of the journey was especially when you're in it and you don't see, it gets really dark at that part, I think. You don't see the end.
Yeah, I did watch one of your videos, the one where you were talking about the mental health challenges that you were going through, the emotional, emotional episodes that you're going through, going for the PhD. I have not gone through masters nor PhD myself, but having friends going through PhD, what Kyrene and yourself, Azalia, has mentioned, it seems like everyone that I know that's doing PhD has gone through this. And I love the fact that you decided to document your journey on PhD, because the fact that there is this channel out there where people can go and watch it and be like, oh, there's someone else who feels that way. There's someone else is going through this, because it's a lonely journey. And I've spoken to my friends who are going through PhD, and they, now in retrospect, basically just mirroring their emotions to me, saying that, oh, they're going through a hard time, challenges, but I couldn't fathom it back then. It's really, they are just going through such a lone wolf journey where they are just sort of spiraling down. I've seen some of them still haven't finished their PhD after 8-9 years now, because they took a few years off because of the burden, emotionally, mentally. I have some friends now also struggling to finish because the supervisor has decided to go off to another country. For example, I have another friend who, unfortunately, the supervisor actually passed away, and he is left to be the sole person pursuing this study, which is so niche. And as you guys said, you are the only one who knows about this stuff, and you want to reach that relief at the end of the day where you create something, right? I don't know. It seems like such an arduous and huge challenge even to begin with, which is kind of like, I'm interested to know what you guys feel after going through so many years of this now. So having gone through the journey and realizing how dark the journey could be, what do you guys actually feel about pursuing PhD? Perhaps this could be something that you guys could share for anyone who's even considering it, because I think that would be quite useful and beneficial for others to know too.
That's a very good point. I think this goes back to knowing why you're doing your PhD, because in general, even if you talk to people who did their PhD before you even do one, they would always say, okay, it's hard. It's always going to be hard. It's just a matter of you pulling through and finding your ways, knowing what solution you would go on to make sure that you're mentally okay, physically okay, because it's very time consuming, it's energy draining, but you need to know your whys. I think I remember that, when I was mentioning when I was panicking during my second year, and at that time, Magat and I would always go climbing almost every other day. And at that point, I was like, I can't do this. I can't cope with having, doing climbing with Magat and talking with him, whereas in the back of my mind, all I'm thinking is, how the heck do I do this bit? What should I do? What steps do I need to take? So, is a very immature move, I have to admit, for me, taking myself away from Magat and not answering all his texts and calls, or even my friends in general. But then I definitely spend a lot more time talking to my mom and ruminating, okay, I can't be in this position for so long. I need to take action. It's lonely, it's dark, but it's also very worthwhile on the other end. You just have to pull through. I remember, I think I cried to my supervisor as well, and he didn't really know what to do. But I think after that moment, I realized, okay, I've let all my lowest of the low of myself go. And now it's just for me to step it up. I can do this. I know why I wanted to do this. And this project, in hindsight, will benefit a lot of people. So I just needed to take a step back and then replan. Things might not go accordingly because, as plan goes. That's when I started doing a lot of, okay, if this doesn't go right, what should I do this? Okay, this answer doesn't really lead to my question. Fine, change my question so that, or maybe it's invalidating, making my hypothesis not invalidating my hypothesis, which means my hypothesis is not it's invalidating my hypothesis, which means it doesn't mean that it's a not positive result. It's a result that people will use to make sure that, okay, they won't do this certain way. Maybe there's something more to this. Maybe I'm missing something. So instead of saying, oh, I did this wrong, it's more of like, okay, this answer does not answer this question. Okay, so why? Finding out whys, and basically just going with the flow and never really never blame yourself for things that didn't go your way. That was the key for me.
I really, really resonate with you on the last part on, when we are panicking in the beginning, we always think like it's wrong, it's wrong and there's no way out. But when you get to the deeper heart of research, and I know it's, very cliche for you to go for the Thomas Edison kind of thing. Like, I found out how a light bulb did not work 1,000 ways.
Yeah.
But that is the research. You just found out that one thing didn't work, but it doesn't mean that it is a negative result. It doesn't mean that it is a bad result. So I had similar experience as well, where I just thought, okay, so now this is all a waste of time, and like, why is it even worth it? But yeah, that's the part you got to get through, of understanding and knowing that it's the part of research that you have to pull through. And I think in most ways that is the part that a lot of people don't really understand, or not understand, I mean the misconception of which part of PhD is hard. Because when they tell you that the PhD is hard, or it's going to be difficult, especially like in the beginning and you're still in it, the planning stage, everything is still bright and happy, so you're like, I can do this, carrying out the plan, things are going, everything's cool, and I say it's hard. But then the hard part is the part when things go wrong and there's nobody else but you. It's just you. You can't look at, there's nothing else but yourself to look at. And that's the difficult part that you need to get through. And I think, yes, same as Kyrene as well. You do, like, since it's something that only you understand, blocking out people is also something I did. And I didn't have a lot of people around me. I only had my husband. But thank God he's an angel that understands his wife. So there are days when I will just shut off. I will shut off and just, I'm not doing anything that day. I won't do anything, but he understands. He'll be like, okay, gives me my space. But the great thing is having the support. He's like, you can do this. When you need me, you let me know. I know you can do this. You can do this. And after you get over that part and you're like, okay, take a step, like you just say, take a step back, look at it again. And, that's how you not exactly get over it, but I'll say go through it.
Push through,
Yeah. You go through it that way.
I think it's very curious to hear both of you speak about this journey, about really your sort of like learning about yourself, right? You're facing the mirror and really looking at yourself and looking at the parts where this is the part where you had a quote unquote bad result, where it really isn't a bad result, right? It's a stepping stone towards going further and progressing itself. And I wanted to connect it with the fact that of course I didn't go through PhD, but I think facing failure is part of growing up, is part of like going further. And that's something that when we were going through school, at least when my experience in school was that you always had this bubble, you had a syllabus, you had an answer scheme that okay, you just had to get this right.
Yeah.
But when you're doing PhD, or I connect this to my experience doing a startup as well, it's like there isn't really a set answer. You don't know what the correct answer is, and you're sort of on a ship exploring the open sea. You don't know when the next island is. You don't know when your next finding is, and you may end up going to one direction. You're going in 3 days in, we're like, oh no, we made the wrong direction. We need to turn around now. What's going to do? Do we have enough food? Blah blah blah. But it's such a adventure in that sense. But I mean, kudos has to you guys and all PhDs who are still going through this journey. It's not easy, I'm sure.
Yeah, and just to chime in, I think there's so much that even for those who don't do a PhD could take away from this, because clearly everyone goes through their own like trials and tribulations in work or other endeavors, starting a business. And I think at the end of the day, it's just that there are some days where it's dark and you might just feel like the day's not gonna end and, you know, things are just gonna crumble. But I think resilience, grit, and knowing that you have the support around you, and, you know, being innovative as well with how you want to approach a problem, I think is super key, as opposed to just like throwing in the towel when things don't work your way, because things will never go to plan when it comes to PhD or any other work or project that you may decide to start in the future.
I have a question for Azalia and Kairin. What was one thing that you wish you knew before you started PhD that you did not know? And you wish someone told you, like, hey, just a tip, you should know this first before you get on this, embark on this challenge.
I think this is a very general, and it's been said a lot of times in the academic world. Like, it's a well-known advice. It's not new, but it's still a mistake that I think people still, like, I'll be okay. And that is choosing the right supervisor. Like, to me, that is the biggest thing, because like it sounds easy. It sounds really easy. Like, okay, just choose this supervisor is good. He likes my work. But sometimes you might be like, oh, but this is a prestigious university. But supervisors, but I got the name, or nice supervisor, not so, like those kind of things. But like I said, it's a super lonely journey where if there's at least one person you can count on to actually light the way for you, or actually push you in the direction that you need to do, or give you, PhD is actually training, it's a training to be a researcher, training for the field, training to be an academic. Right. It's not just like, hey, you do, it's supposed to be a training ground. So in my opinion, the best advice that I can give to anyone who wants to do it, that, I wish I would know now, is to have a supervisor that really can help you with what you are doing. Because, I mean, not saying that you can't do it without a helpful supervisor or not. You can still do it with grit and, all your energy. But it will definitely make your PhD life much more better, in my opinion, by having that person with you.
I think what Azalia mentioned is very important. That is very, very true. Supervisor makes up the whole of your PhD journey. Your university, not really. So it doesn't matter if your supervisor is in, a university that is not well known, but if he or she is good in training you, that's all. In the end, the support is the main thing. You want to be able to have an open communication with your supervisor. If he's barely there, then you're lost, and that's the last thing you need, because you need all the support for PhD. I'm just trying to think in terms of what I wish I would have known, because after my master's, I worked for 3 years, and during that 3 years, I meticulously took my time in talking to people, seeing people going through the PhD, seeing the process. So in an extent, I think I was in this area of, I have all the information I needed. but is jumping into the unknown of myself was my question that I needed to ask, was that, am I capable enough to do this? So it's more introspection than it is knowing what I needed to do. So if any advice I would give out is to really question why you wanted to do a PhD. And it's not a matter of having greater pay or having the title. Those only last for, I don't know, a couple months. And then you get to the hard bit, what's going to pull you through. Know your attitude of wanting to do a PhD. It's hard. Do you have this system of pulling yourself up when you don't really want it to? So that kind of thing is what I would give advice on.
So I think a question I've always had, and it has always amazed me, how at the age of 18, right after SPM or the equivalent of O-levels in the UK, you're able to pick up a different language and go to a country where you don't even speak a single language and do your degree. What more, even write a dissertation and defend your dissertation to a panel of critical academics. So I've always wondered, was it even doubly hard doing your PhD in Japan, given the language requirements? What was it like? Were you writing in Japanese? And, to what extent was English applied in your PhD process? Because let's face it, that's the language that we grew up with.
Okay, so in the beginning, during my degree, actually, in Japan, you have to write a thesis to graduate for any degree at all.
Yeah.
So we had to write a thesis, and at that time, I was ready to write in English. I wanted to write in English because I was in the Faculty of Education anyway, so they accepted it. But the only give or take was the supervisor I wanted to work with wasn't able to sufficiently check my work in English. So if I wanted to have my thesis written in English, I had to get the really scary sensei who was in charge of the English department, and I wasn't willing. So at that point, I was like, okay, sensei, I trust you, so I'm gonna write my my undergrad degree in Japanese. So my first undergrad degree, I actually wrote in full Japanese. But that's why, going back to what I said about having a very supportive supervisor, when I had her, no matter how hard it was for me to write a whole thesis in Japanese, she was always there. Like, she had a system for me, so she made it easy. She was like, you done your first chapter, send it to me. And she checks it right away, she gives it back. And of course, there were so many corrections. But I got through it, I passed, it was great. So when I went into PhD, I was very, very, very sure that I did not want to do it in Japanese, because while the undergrad degree was 30, 40 pages, and it was still doable, but 150 plus pages, I don't think I'll be able to do it. So on the get-go, when I applied for the program, I said up front that I would like to write my thesis in English. That's the main point. I want to write my thesis in English. So my supervisor was okay with it. He said, yeah, sure, there's no problem. We can write it in English. However, since you do have Japanese proficiency and your thesis is talking about Japanese language education, I think it would be quite appropriate if you defend and have your presentations in Japanese.
Oh no.
I was like, okay, all right. So going back to the question, it was difficult, but at the same time, I have to say, the thing about doing it in Japan, if the background of Japan in a sense is, everyone knows their English is all right, not the best, but because they know that second language is very hard, they are very accepting, at least in my university, they are very accepting of when you're Japanese, even though it's broken, or, you're slitting in some English words while you're talking. They totally accept that, especially my committee members. So that made it easier. But it actually gave me a lot of confidence, I have to say, to be able to defend my thesis and give my presentations in Japanese, because it is my third language. And it also, in a way, my point being is that you don't have to be fully fluent in a language to be able to say that you can use it or confidently use it. You can have broken English or broken Japanese and use it confidently and still be considered a language user. Like that's the most realistic way of being a second language learner based on literature. So yeah, that part is the Japanese part, I think.
I do want to ask though, because you've now picked up Japanese as well, and I'm curious to know, do you think picking up this other language has given you a different perspective in terms of just general outlook on life? And because picking up Japanese as well, I kind of feel that it's now ingrained in part of my identity as well, because there are a few things, and for people who do speak other languages out there, you will know that there are certain things which cannot be translated. There are some things that you need to express it in the language itself to be able to say what you really mean. And I don't know, I just want to have a quick peek in terms of what your outlook is on that, Azalia.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like they say, right, your personality changes when you use the language. So I do find myself changing personalities. I don't know, changing. Maybe Ruiz, we can talk and see if our personality changes. I don't know. But yeah, like I guess I feel the part where you say it's part of my identity now. I do feel like it's ingrained in me and something that like it's hard for me to separate from myself. Yeah. So yeah, definitely.
So just wrapping things up then, I wanted to find out from the both of you what your plans are post-PhD. I mean, obviously, Azalia, you've more or less been conferred your PhD. Kyrene, you're at the last sprint and, hopefully you'll be done soon. Mm-hmm. But if you could share with us your plans, and I think that would be a nice way to tie this whole conversation up.
Oh. For me, the plan is to still stick within science field / health sector. I've been in academia and research for a good 7 to 8 years now. And as much as I love it, I don't think I wanted to do it for the rest of my life. But something that I know that I'm good at whilst I was doing my PhD and working is managing projects and starting up clinical trials and all that stuff. So that is exactly the plan that I'll be going into.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm going the not the natural, I can't think of the word.
Rite of passage.
Maybe, yeah, okay. The road that people have always taken, not the road not taken, the people usually take in academia, which is to apply for a faculty position. So I'm in the midst of going for interviews for faculty positions in Malaysia. I mean, I know it's not going to be easy because it is, I mean, part of the anxiety part of finishing your PhD is not knowing what comes after that. And although I did say it was like, the rite of passage is a way that everyone goes through, not everyone can easily just land a faculty position because, as we know, the markets are very saturated. No matter which country, even Malaysia, we are producing so many PhD graduates, and not just PhD graduates, all our graduates are now having a lot of issues in finding any kind of jobs. So, and I think the reason why PhDs might feel it even more is because we've invested our youth, not our youth, but we've invested that time that other people have used to gain experience, to work. We have we've invested that in our studies. So when we do go for any jobs outside of academia, people will see like there's a gap here. Where have you been? And we'll be like, oh, I was in school, and they're like, oh, but you don't have what we're looking for, yada yada yada. So that is, I think, an issue a lot of people have, and why most PhDs are afraid to venture, or not afraid to venture. They do want to, but it's difficult. It's difficult. So just to mention that, I've been reading a really interesting book on this. It's called "So What Are You Going to Do with That?" By Susan Basala and Maggie Debelius, and it really highlights all the other things that you can do other than go the academic route or go to university. And like Kyrene mentioned, especially while doing your PhD, you find out what you're good at, especially like not just the PhD itself, but you find out what you're, you're good at managing, you're good at writing, you're actually good at which part. So you can really use those skills for other jobs as well. Yeah. So I think it's something that everyone can think about at the end of their PhD journey.
So I do want to ask about your YouTube channel, Academically Speaking. For anyone who hasn't subscribed, please subscribe to Academically Speaking. But I do want to know though, because you mentioned that the channel has been your way of documenting your journey, and you are right now at the end of the journey. But are you? What's up for the channel then?
I was thinking about it, and for now I think I can continue it in a tangent, saying that from post PhD, what happens after that, because that's something that I think people also would be curious about.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, also maybe especially advice on scholarships is also something cool. So yeah, that part I think.
So I think that's about it from us today. And obviously, thank you so much, Azalia, for agreeing to be a part of this podcast. It was such a great discussion I think we had. And hopefully we could keep in touch, and all the best for your future and your interviews.
Thank you so much for having me.
Feel free to interact with us if you have any questions. If you'd like to follow up with Azalia, we'll put her Twitter handle in our podcast description. And otherwise, if you want to interact with Kyrene as well, just you know where to find us, the Neighbors Pod on Twitter/Instagram. But otherwise, thank you for listening to us. Do click subscribe, and see you guys next week.